Welcome to Peak Sound Radio's Weekend Breakfast. I'm Chris. Thanks so much for joining me for Island Conversation and Island Stories. Today we're going to be talking with Elsie Gawler of SpringTide. Elsie, along with Ethan Tischler and Willie Clemenson, are going to be performing at the Peaks Island House Concert Series on May 12th at 7 p.m. SpringTide combines a high-energy traditional Celtic and Scandinavian fiddle music with heartfelt original tunes and songs. I had a great time talking to Elsie, who's from a musical family in Maine that you may have heard of, in the Mid-Coast, the Gawlers. Hope you enjoy this conversation. For more local stories and local conversations, check out peaksoundradio.com. You're the first summer concert this year, and I wonder if you have any plans to sort of play up the fact that you're the first one. So finally nice weather in Maine, and I'm wondering how that's going to factor into the show that you're going to be doing on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our band name is SpringTide, and so we like to lean into that a little bit, especially this time of year. And I think we're all just delighted that the sun is out and it's easier to be outside together, and it just feels like a really celebratory time of year. And our music definitely reflects that. And it's kind of uplifting, joyful sounds and fiddle tunes and songs. And I think we're excited to be kicking off the summer and the season with our music, especially on Peaks Island. Willie Clemenson, Ethan Tischler, and myself, Elsie Gawler, we are the three members of SpringTide. And we all live in kind of the greater Belfast area. We spend a lot of time on the ocean and on the water. And SpringTide is a term when the tides are at their when there's the greatest difference between the high tide and the low tide, usually after a full or new moon, and it's when the three planetary bodies, the moon, the sun, and the earth, are in alignment. And we thought that was kind of cool because we're a trio, and our music has a lot of energy to it, and so it just felt like a fitting name for the three of us. It kind of ties in a lot of things that we love in our lives. So yeah, that's where our name comes from.
That's great. That's very unique and has a great story. I like that a lot. So you talked about the energy of your music a couple of times. For folks who are thinking about going to the show on Friday, what kind of energy does your music bring? What can folks expect?
Yeah, so we play a lot of fiddle tunes, both traditional and original. We all write a lot of our own music, and we love playing for contra dances. And if you can just imagine that kind of toe tapping energy that just makes you want to get up and dance. We love bringing that energy to our music, and so that's kind of one thing you can expect. And then also we write and sing a lot of our own songs, so we do a lot of 3-part vocal harmonies, and yeah, it does have an uplifting energy to them as well.
That's great. So how did you first become interested in this type of music? Because you turn on the radio and you can get all sorts of types of music, but it is hard to find traditional music. So I'm wondering what sort of led you to become part of that traditional music world.
Yeah, so I was very lucky in that I was born into it. My parents, John and Ellen Gawler, live in the Belgrade area, and they've been playing this type of music across the state of Maine since they were in their 20s, so over 50 years. And my sisters and I, it's all we really knew growing up. I actually, most music you would hear on the radio, I didn't really know existed for a really long time. So we grew up going to contra dances, and our parents would be playing, and they would bring along sleeping bags and just kind of roll them out behind the piano, and we would fall asleep to we just fall asleep to it. So it's very much in my blood and my DNA. So feel very lucky to have been just immersed in it since I was before I was born, really.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Terrific. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that early experience that you had with the music, and if you remember a time where maybe you had started to gravitate towards a particular instrument or a particular sound out of that music that you were growing up with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my mom is also a violin teacher, so she taught my sisters and I how to play violin since we were about 3 years old. And I'm the youngest of the three. And being the youngest, sometimes you want to carve your own path. And I started casting my eyes about and laid eyes on a cello for a little while and thought, gosh, I kind of really want to play that instrument. So I switched when I was 9 and just had a real affinity towards the lower end, the bigger bodied sound. Um, and it was really, really fun learning how cello fits into traditional music because it's not traditionally part of the sound. Um, and I had a lot of wonderful teachers at Maine Fiddle Camp, and now I teach at Maine Fiddle Camp. But I learned a lot about how the cello can fit in both melodically playing the melody, but also have this really rich low end where I get to play chords and rhythm, and I'm kind of occupying like a guitar bass realm with the cello too. So it's it's been so fun to figure out how cello fits into these fiddle tunes and bring a really unique sound to it. So that's how I gravitated towards the instrument that I play.
That's really neat. Did you get any pushback from your musical family when you decided that you wanted to do cello?
No, no, nope. My parents have been very supportive throughout my whole life. So yeah, they were they're thrilled about anything that I was excited about playing.
Oh, that's great. Good.
Yeah.
And then, so diving into the music itself, were you listening to this music largely because your family was playing it and participating in live events, or did you have like a music collection as well that was largely trad music?
Yeah, some of both. A lot of albums that I listen to now and also growing up were albums that people we knew had made. So yeah, it was wonderful just to have people in our community who recorded music, and then a lot of those albums are just very much in my mind from having listened to them a lot. Um, but also, this type of music really it it thrives. It stays alive and thrives in places where people get to play together. Um, so places like Maine Fiddle Camp, um, where I've been going since I was a young kid, um, is an amazing place to really connect through these tunes with lots of people. Um, and I think that's I think that's the beauty of the tradition is that it's really meant to connect people.
So tell me about Maine Fiddle Camp and what makes it sort of a special place for you.
Yeah, Maine Fiddle Camp it happens in Montville, Maine, so kind of near Belfast, Liberty area. Um, and it's a camp for all ages, and we play a wide variety of tunes from Quebec and Scotland, Ireland, some Scandinavian music, but really the camp is really focuses on kind of New England contradance music, tunes that have been played in Maine and throughout New England for a really long time, 100 to 200 hundreds of years. So it's really special to kind of keep those tunes alive and well, and playing them and teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
And Main Fiddle Camp is also where I met both Willie and Ethan at different times. I met Willie. I've known Willie since we were kids, so we grew up in Main Fiddle Camp together. And then Ethan, my partner, we met when I was, in 2016, so much later in my life. But it's just, Main Fiddle Camp just draws a lot of wonderful people together and is an amazing place to make lifelong friends and connections. And it's done that for me in my life.
That's great. That does sound like a really great place. And I want to talk a little bit about the New England country dance music. So I think my first instinct when I heard you talk about that was to think of it as essentially transported English music. But then I had a second thought that, well, gee, maybe that's not the case, because there was a lot of mixing of cultures, even in old New England. And I wonder if you have any insight into that, and what the mixture is, if there is a mixture.
Yeah, it's from England, Ireland, Scotland, and then Cape Breton and Quebec. So these tunes have kind of traveled with people as they have immigrated and migrated to, all of those places.
Mm-hmm.
And the tradition is really, just a combination of all of those sounds. And they all come from the same root, really. They're just different branches of the same tree. Yeah.
So a few of the people that I've spoken with who've come out for the winter concert series and also last year's summer concert series have talked about how a lot of times you learn this music. And I know that your mom had been sort of your earliest teacher in terms of music, but you learn this music through sort of the prior generation or generations passing it down. Is that something that's been part of your experience outside of your mom's teaching?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. My parents definitely did that when they were in their 20s. They sought out the old timers throughout Maine and sat down with them and learned their tunes. And then, my parents' generation, there's a large number of wonderful folks in Maine who were all connected, and they all just loved this style of music, and would seek it out and learn it. And so, and those are the folks, my parents' generation, who founded Main Fiddle Camp. And so, especially there and also elsewhere, there are lots of folks who I've learned tunes from over the years, and I still love sitting down with them at sessions or just one-on-one and just being like, hey, what's a fun tune you like? And just learning new tunes. And it's really, there are so many gems, and it's amazing to kind of collect them and keep playing them together. So I feel like I definitely feel like we're tradition bearers, and feels like a really special thing to get to keep these tunes alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now where I feel like in our era, there's just this constant sort of drive towards like the newest or most novel thing. It's very inspiring, frankly, to hear about your role in keeping traditional music alive and keeping alive something that's been sort of cared for and passed on from generation to generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have conversations with people who are maybe part of your generation about why they should care about traditional music and why it plays an important role in your life?
It's an interesting question. I don't feel like I've ever had that conversation of like why it's important, but I think with the people who are drawn to this music, they just feel it. They see how it connects people. They see it's really accessible. A lot of these tunes follow the same structure. So it's a little bit like its own language. Once you kind of know a few of the words, you can start speaking and just hop in and have a conversation with somebody. And so I think a lot of people they feel that, and they think they're just like, oh yes, I want to do this. I want to keep participating in this and have these conversations and keep it alive. So I think it just in the way that it connects people and brings a lot of people joy, I think it kind of keeps itself alive in that way.
Sure, sure. So, I think that what I'm hearing you say is that it's not so much about, age or generation. It's more about whether or not it grabs somebody, or like the light switch goes off, like, wow, I want to participate in this. I get where this music's coming from, and I want to jump in.
Totally. Yeah. There are amazing youngsters. There's the next generation who are just whippersnappers and amazing players, and they are playing these tunes and they love it as well. So yeah, totally. It doesn't just speak to one age or one generation. It really draws people in of all ages.
I think you had mentioned before that you, in addition to playing traditional music that has already been, written or composed by others, that you also are creating new music in that tradition as well. Can you talk a little bit about the music that the three of you have written, and whether or not you're going to be sharing some of that with us on Friday?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a really fun process, and I think a beautiful thing to be so steeped in a particular tradition, but then also to weave in your own voice in that. And I think that's a really cool conversation between the old and the new. And our music definitely reflects that. I write a lot of tunes and songs. Willie is an amazing tunesmith. He's also an amazing songwriter too. We mostly play his tunes with our trio, and Ethan also is a fantastic songwriter and tunesmith. And we do play a large number of original tunes and songs. And they're absolutely inspired by the tradition that we come from. They just have our own flavor to them. Mm-hmm. And then we also play, we have a few sets where we just play some traditional tunes that we just love to play. But it's really, really fun to kind of write music within a tradition or within a particular sound.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, because of you playing a traditional instrument, if it's also a chance for you to highlight cello a bit more. Is it easier to sort of work cello in when you're creating your own original tunes?
Definitely is, yeah. And for people who don't necessarily play a stringed instrument or know the difference, the cello has 3 of the same strings as the violin, but it's missing that very high E string. That's a particular string to the fiddle. And a lot of tunes were written on that E string. And it makes playing those tunes very fast on the cello very exciting, because you have to shift all over the place. So yeah, it's definitely it makes it easier to write some of your own tunes and play them on the cello in a much more accessible way. But it's also a fun challenge to play tunes on what tunes that would normally be played on the fiddle on the cello as well.
Terrific. Do you ever find that you have to make like little adjustments even to the traditional tunes that you do pick up?
Definitely, yeah. And that's one of the beauties of this world of music is it's not set in stone. Some of these tunes are written down on paper, but you'll find different versions of the same tune all over the place, and It's from folks. It's through the folk process, and they, you know, you can change them and adapt them to what what suits you. It's very flexible and fluid in that way, which I think makes it very fun and interesting. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like you had said before about even the writing of the tunes, it also does definitely put your unique stamp on this tradition, and it certainly places you in the tradition, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of folks are, in our generation who are in this music are doing very similar things. They're taking in all of the older songs and older styles and really, learning, having a great foundation from which to, write their own music and kind of share their own voice. And I think it's a really beautiful thing, a really cool process, and it's fun to be a part of.
Hmm. So I wonder too. I noticed in the photo that you had sent along for this episode that there's also a guitar too. Is that also a sort of newer addition to traditional music, or has that been played for 100 years in contra music?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I don't know when the guitar kind of came into traditional music, but for as long as I am aware of, it's been a pretty solid part of this kind of music. Um, I don't, that's a great question. I actually don't know the history of the guitar and kind of how and when it came in. But yeah, Ethan Tischler is the guitar player in our trio. And yeah, I'm gonna hazard a guess that maybe it was more typical in Irish music. And um, he often plays in a particular tuning called a dadgad. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but DAD, GAD are the note names of the strings, and it's that's a pretty common sound you'll hear in Irish music, especially.
At this point, I'm wondering, do you have anything else that you'd like to share that you would like folks in the island to know about the upcoming show, or what you're hoping that people will sort of take away if they come to the show?
They're very heartfelt, and we really love kind of spreading joy and peacefulness of the heart in our music. So, and we've heard from folks who have listened to our music that they go away feeling kind of like content and happy. So I think that's a wonderful thing to spread more of around in the world, and so I hope that's what people can take away if and when they come see us on the island. And I hope that's what we can share with your community.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that sounds delightful, and I think that makes a good, um, you know, marketing pitch too, right? Like, do you want to be content and happy?
Yeah.
Come here, SpringTide. That's terrific.
I wish I remembered the specific words for the review of my album. Actually, I have it here. So this kind of captures a little bit of the feel of, especially my music, but also for the three of us as well. For my album, it was written that it's an album filled with themes of metaphorical journeys, the happiness of community, and the soul-affirming warmth of the earth. So it's a feel-good album, much needed in these troubled days. So just kind of, those are some words that kind of other written about our music.
That's lovely. I'm so glad that you found that. That is delightful to hear. And actually, before I let you go, if you have another minute, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your solo album that you put out. Is that also, like your trio, a blend of old and new, or is it mostly newer pieces that you've written?
Yeah, the solo albums, so actually both Ethan and I have written and released solo albums. And for both of us, they are 100% original songs. And oddly enough, there's actually no fiddle on my album at all. It's all songs, mostly written on the banjo, but definitely inspired from the world of music we've just been talking about traditional music. And we play a fair number of the songs from both my album and Ethan's album in our trio, SpringTide, as well. Yeah, so each of us bring, the three of us each bring our own music to the group, and it's really such a fun process of bringing each other's music to life, what we've written, and kind of, just giving it full color with the three voices.
Mm-hmm. That's terrific. Yeah, I wonder, and maybe you can speak to this, if when you are putting out, a solo album, or if you're thinking through, writing a song for banjo, for example, if you can sort of hear like, oh, gee, this would sound great with a fiddle, or this would sound great with a guitar, and then having the opportunity to bring it into another, group or another project that you're working in, if that makes a difference.
That happens sometimes where I'm writing a song, and I think, oh gosh, I hear this fiddle part or this guitar part, but I'd say more often than that, I write a song or a tune and then bring it to Ethan and Willie, and they come up with a part that I could have imagined, and it's just so delightfully theirs, like their voice and I love it when that happens. Like, they surprise me all the time with beautiful lines and beautiful accompanying parts, and I love that about our collaboration.
That's neat. That, I think, really resonates with the conversation part that you were talking about before. And I wonder how much of that happens in real time, and if you could sort of elaborate on that. So I know you did just talk about how they will bring a line or a part in. How much of that is happening like a spoken conversation where you're sort of playing off of each other in the moment?
Yeah, a fair bit, actually. Yes, it absolutely is a conversation, and often we will go into it knowing certain things about where the conversation will go, but a significant part of what we all play definitely happens in the moment, and I absolutely love that. I love really playing with two other people who are just listening so intently and listening to each other and just being right there in the moment to respond to what the other person is doing. And I can't say that we've really played much the same way twice. And I love that. I think it's a really beautiful thing. And they're both such great musicians, and it's really special to get to have that conversation with them.
That's great. I recognize that what I'm about to ask you is a challenge, and if it's impossible to put into words, you can feel free to tell me that. But I wonder, for somebody who hasn't had that experience of conversing through music like that, how does it feel? Like, is there a way that you can describe sort of the well of emotion or thought that happens in that moment?
That's such a great question. I would say, depending on who you are and what you love to do, say you love sailing, and you're just having an amazing sailing moment where your sails are full and you're flying across the water and the sun is shining, and you just feel like, yes, I am alive, and I feel this is an amazing moment, and you're just very in the moment. So depending on what you love, whatever brings you that feeling of just like presence. That's kind of what it feels like, I guess.
That certainly sounds like what athletes or what others describe as like the flow state. Be really interesting to see that in person come Friday. Thanks so much for talking with me. Do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share with folks on the island ahead of Friday's concert?
We're really looking forward to being on the island and taking in the beauty of your community and your neck of the woods. We all spend a lot of time outside and on the water and on the coast of Maine, and those things absolutely influence my music, and I think it's safe to say they influence Lily and Ethan's as well. So it's just really special to be in a place that reflects things that we hold so near and dear to our own hearts, and that definitely influence our music. So we're really looking forward to being out there.
Thank you so much. We're really looking forward to having you out here and for you to be bringing your music out here. We appreciate you sharing with us. And I hope that you get to spend some time on the island enjoying the nature and the beauty of the island too.
Me as well. I think we will.
Great. Good. All right. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you as well. Yeah, it's been really, really fun to talk to you. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this conversation with Elsie Gawler of SpringTide. Hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll make your way to the first of the season summer concert for the Peak Silent House Concert Series at New Brackett Church, May 12th at 7 p.m. For more local stories and local conversations, check out Peak Silent Radio on 1700 AM and peaksilentradio.com.